Get out of here. I can't handle it. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I know folks are still logging on.
Hi, Lucas, I'm back in.
Hey, everybody. All right. I think my router might be overheating with the heat or something. My internet bounced. Hopefully this works.
Okay. Oh yeah, it got an interruption. It got interrupted.
All right, everyone's joining back in. All right, we got almost 30 people back in. Okay, Lucas, you want to try it again? Lucas, are you able to share? Not yet. Sorry, here we go. Try it now, see if it works. Okay, here we go. Hey, Lucas, can everyone else hear Lucas?
No.
Okay, Lucas, we can't hear you.
Ah, I got muted again. Okay.
There you go.
I'm sorry about that.
You're back.
All right, really sorry about that. Yeah, so just backing up a slide, I was mentioning that we can do some of these things very quickly in-house, which includes signage, striping, curb painting, and designation of bike routes. But we also want to, at the conclusion of this project, have a set of long-term recommendations, which would require capital funding or coordination with paving. And these include curb ramp, sidewalk enhancements, traffic circles, speed humps, which actually can do some of those quickly, and signal modifications. So the idea is that we want to have a set of both, so that we can both improve conditions right away for people and also get some longer term projects in the pipeline. So looking at the schedule, I think the colors got a little wonky here, but that's all right. We are planning 3 meetings with the NCTC. Right now, those specific dates could change, but they would occur 3 times throughout the project. Once to share existing conditions, once to share draft recommendations, and then also a final plan. And we really also want to emphasize that outreach is ongoing. Like, we want to listen to you today, we want to listen to you next week and next month about the things that are really important to you in your neighborhood. But we are probably going to try and get a jump on the data collection to the extent that we can. And we are overall trying for a fairly quick timeline on this, about 6 months once we officially kick off. And then hopefully, again, we'll have at the end of this both the near-term improvements that we can get to work on right away, and also the longer-term capital improvements. And I think that's really all I wanted to share in terms of the project overview. But I did want to open up if there are any questions or discussion that we should be having now. My information is there if you want to contact me anytime. But I think the intent was also to have some discussion today. So I will stop talking now and let others take over.
Thanks, Lucas. That's I think that's a lot of good information for folks to kind of digest what has happened, and hopefully give some comfort that what they've been sharing and saying has been received, understood, and incorporated into at least the approach moving forward. From the DOT side, did we want to talk about the slow streets, the possibility of Nay actually becoming a slow street?
Absolutely, and this is Megan. I have just a few more slides to share on the slow street side of things. If I could share my screen now.
Please, you should be able to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can everyone see? Okay. Yep. Excellent. So again, I wanted to just provide a brief overview of our Slow Streets program, just to ensure that we're all on the same page with respect to just today's discussion. Slow Streets is OakDOT's program that was launched in response to COVID-19. We've been implementing partial street closures to provide more space for safe, essential travel and walking and biking during COVID-19. And this means restricting traffic, no through traffic, but we are using barricades, cones, and signs, things that can be implemented quickly in response to the emergency. And traffic that is allowed through still continues to be, of course, residents who live on these streets, emergency access, so coordinating very closely with OPD and fire, and ensuring that access for ambulances, et cetera, is still maintained by the installation, as well as local deliveries. I wanted to give some examples here today of what slow streets look like. So this is a typical implementation. You've probably hopefully seen slow streets implemented throughout the city. We now have 20 miles of slow streets that have been implemented since April 11th. And this is a map that illustrates where slow streets exist today. Again, 20 miles across Oakland. Our most recent implementation was last weekend close to Lake Merritt. And a critical part for us with respect to slow streets has been engaging Oaklanders on slow streets. So overall, we've had really strong support for slow streets. We've been working to develop engagement tools that people can use, under shelter-in-place conditions. And this slide depicts a map where people are able to thumbs up or thumbs down slow streets, as well as share comments. We have an online survey that everyone's welcome to complete on our website, and some really key findings and also feedback that we've heard to date through some deeper engagement that Nicole Ferrara has been leading for us, and she's also on today's call, have been that while overall we have strong support for slow streets haven't been experienced in the same way throughout Oakland. And we've been really working to deepen engagement, particularly in East Oakland, to better understand how slow streets can meet the needs of communities, under COVID-19, and are really here today to better understand what people think of the program and how it can be best implemented to meet the needs of community. So this is a really high-level overview of slow streets. Thanks everyone for your time today, and wanted to just turn it back over to Councilmember Taylor to share more with respect to what we've been talking about with respect to Ney Avenue. We've been talking so far about from 73rd to 82nd as potentially being the geography. So really similar to the traffic calming study that Lucas shared. We're really excited about the synergies with that study, looking at the deeper analysis and engagement is really a complement to a potential slow street in the short term. And I'll stop there.
Great, thanks so much. I wanted to jump to a couple of the questions in the chat that came out. One question was, can we talk about funding? So I guess what you guys are talking about is the questions, how is it being funded? And then there was a question that said, how come no one mentioned folks running stop signs? What solutions are there for that? And I maybe could speak of that. I think I did see something about in the study addressing the fact that there was some traffic violations occurring as well.
I think I'll
please go ahead, Lucas. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on funding. I think that part of the division of short-term and longer-term recommendations is that the shorter-term ones, by and large, we can implement those with our operating budget. And then for longer-term recommendations, we are often seeking grant funding. And right now, we're actually working on a grant for a Safe Routes to School project elsewhere in Oakland. And so there may be opportunities there. But the other thing that's sort of important to note there is that when I also mentioned coordination with paving, and the reason behind that is that like you can actually implement projects far more cost effectively when you are combining them with a paving project. So I think we would also be looking at longer term opportunities to see if we may be implementing traffic circles or curb ramps or things like that in the long term in coordination with that.
Thanks for that, Lucas. Did you have something else to add, Megan?
No, Lucas did a great job. Nothing else to add. Thanks.
Great. Okay, I do see two hands raised. So first, Dara Geckler and then Sudeep Ray.
No, I'm still on mute.
Just unmuted you, Dara.
Okay, thank you.
Or is it Dara?
Dara.
Dara, sorry about that.
So I'm curious about a couple of things about sort of coordination with police, given the violence that's been happening in the area. I mean, to be perfectly frank, we had 2 shootings several weeks ago within a block of my house, and I haven't walked in my neighborhood since. And I used to love walking in this neighborhood, and I don't do it because there's gunshots day and night here. And so I would love to have a slow street on Ney, but how is that, I'm not gonna, and I'm sure many other people in the neighborhood would probably not feel safe walking on Ney, even during the day.
I'm glad you raised that question, and I would like to turn it over to our Chief of Violence Prevention to talk about some of the place-based strategies, and also if we still have Captain Lewis on the line, maybe have him address some of his thoughts as well. But before going there, want to acknowledge Sadeep, since your hand was raised.
Loren, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I think the primary concern here is the speeding. And I think one of the thing the engineer mentioned of collecting data, right? We wanted to make sure the proper data gets collected. And one of the thing the engineer mentioned, getting a head start, we have OPD officers here stationed, right, for 15 days. And then they can provide invaluable data inputs to the DOT team, because they are observing, they are citing, so they can give a heads up what they are observing day in and out, and it helped tremendously, right? At least it's a short-term impact, but I think they have a good insight now how the traffic is moving. The stop sign does not exist. I think they can provide that input to the engineers. Another big concern is the study. The planning of all the suggestion that came out from DOT, how is it going to impact from Hillmont, Outlook, Nay? One of our recommendation was to channel the traffic to a bigger street where OPD can have a bigger presence, so they don't have to monitor multiple streets. I want the DOT team to think about it, and that's the primary concern. You have something, Annie?
My concern is, who and when are you gonna have someone to come out here and really look at the situation here, right here on this corner? We have cars coming here. As soon as the police go down the street, they have somebody watching, and every time you look around, they come out and do the same thing. They go nuts, they're speeding, they're running the stop sign, almost ran over the mailman, and almost ran over a construction guy. You guys need to do something. Don't talk about it. Do something. Don't just say that. Because I live here. I'm handicapped. I don't want none of my cars running up in my neighborhood.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And do you mind sharing your name?
Annie Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
You came to my house. You know me.
Yes, yes, I do. Yes, I do. So absolutely want to acknowledge that I am actually pleased with the effort that has happened to date, because we are seeing partnership between Department of Transportation, Department of Violence Prevention, and our police department in a way that I hadn't seen happening. So that speaks to, I think, a couple different things. One is that there's a recognition around how much more powerful that collaboration is between multiple departments, and the recognition that what we're seeing here in Nay and frankly across East Oakland requires more than just the sort of simpler solutions that might work in downtown or uptown or North Oakland. And so with that, I do want to turn it over to Chief Cespedes to provide a little bit of an overview of sort of the Department of Violence Prevention and its place-based strategy, knowing that there's a broader rollout happening across the city, but we're fortunate to have him and his thinking and partnership relative to what we're doing here as well. So Chief Cespedes.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you. My name is Guillermo Cespedes. I am the Chief of Violence Prevention for the City of Oakland. Actually, the first Chief of Violence Prevention that we know of in the country who is non-law enforcement appointed to this position. The Department of Violence Prevention is also one of the few departments of violence preventions in the country. What we are doing right now is that we have picked the 9 out of the 52 police beats, the 9 police beats that account for 52% of the shootings with injuries and about 24% of domestic violence calls. And we prioritize those police beats as where we would start our interventions. In the middle of planning this, we got hit with the COVID epidemic, And so we have deployed a team to those 9 police beats to do outreach and PPE distribution. But the distribution itself of PPE is not the goal. The goal is to establish relationships with the people that are most likely to be able to stop the shootings. These are the people that are at the highest risk of being shot and at the highest risk of pulling the trigger, to say it in a blunt way. So it's a very small population that we're hyper-focused on. Some of our efforts are in coordination with law enforcement. So what do we have on the ground right now? We have a team of 5 of my team members who have worked in East Oakland for many years. I also live in East Oakland and worked in East Oakland for about 19 years before I became the deputy mayor of LA, and then went overseas to lead efforts overseas. And what we're doing is that we've taken 16 people that come out of those neighborhoods, that know the folks, that know the people that are involved, and they're helping us to identify what kind of agreements do we have to put in place to mitigate the shootings. They have been deployed for about 4 weeks now. And so we're doing 2 things simultaneously, working with law enforcement twice a week to do shootings reviews, and with law enforcement from OPD, and I'll tell you why I mentioned OPD, and I'm working with community members that at one point were involved in a different kind of lifestyle, and they now have become peacemakers. A lot of the shootings that we're experiencing in Oakland in the last 4 weeks, the uptick in shootings, are related to some activity that is going on in San Francisco. So we have San Francisco OPD San Francisco Police Department and Oakland Police Department collaborating at a law enforcement level. We're also bringing together violence interrupters from Oakland and from San Francisco to see if we could get a handle on this. And then the last piece of what's going on in the streets is that, as you know, most of us are a little cranky after having been locked up for so many weeks. And the people that are involved in the perpetration of shootings also are. So first 3 weeks of the pandemic, we saw a significant drop in violence, and then it started to spike up again. We're still ahead of where we were last year, but frankly, if you had a shooting down the block, as one of the residents mentioned, data really doesn't mean anything. So we're very aware of the level of trauma that is being created, especially now that people don't have the mobility that they do, to be able to deal with these shootings. One of the reasons Councilmember Taylor hasn't seen this kind of collaboration before, because frankly, it is new. The idea of looking at Department of Transportation strategies and violence prevention strategies in the same breath, a brand new. So what is the department doing with the issue of Main Street? We're basically using that as an assessment to find out. We're not running a study, but we will be present. We will be talking to neighborhood crime prevention councils. We will be talking with you about during and after Main Street to figure out what our strategy is to complement what they're doing. Specifically, we're thinking that once we have a clearer sense of what Ryan's team is doing, which is absolutely awesome, we will be able to offer kind of our counterpart part of the plan. Like DOT, all of the outreach that we're doing now is not from our operating budget. We have a very humble budget. All of the funding that we get comes from a ballot measure, and that ballot measure mandates that we focus on that population that I mentioned that is at the highest level of being victims or perpetrators of violence. So the more environmental prevention design, which is a category that this would fall under, we're really literally looking for funding to do that more effectively. The outreach work that we're doing with PPE, we were fortunate to get some funding through the Mayor's Innovation Fund. Very, very humble budget. What we do have is a fair amount of knowledge, a lot of people on the ground in those areas that know those communities better than I do, and people that know the community members that we really need to tap into to slow the shootings down.
Chief,
So
if I can help direct your comments a little bit. I know during the other NCPC meeting that you joined, the question came up: what can community members do? How can we sort of activate at the local level to support your efforts?
Absolutely.
And I think that led to some concepts that could be leveraged here in terms of programming
Absolutely.
around Nay Street.
Absolutely. I think that there are different ways to preventing violence, and one of them is absolutely and totally community driven. I think at a time where we're all, looking at the world through our windows, it is important to activate communities to actually come out of the house and begin having a presence. To that degree, safe streets, slow streets, rather, it's an excellent example of that. So I know we've been inside for 7 weeks or 8 weeks, and what we do know is that community engagement, community activities during the times of the week, the days of the week, and the hours of the day where violence is most likely to spike are exactly the times of the day that we need to have community-driven events with the support of OPD. So we will be moving into a summer strategy where we will be asking community neighborhood councils to really activate street activities, whether they're slow streets, whether they're block parties, whether still maintaining adherence to social distancing, but having community presence out in a safe way. Violence fragments community and sends us back in the house, rightfully so, and the opposite of that lessens violence. So that's where we're going with all of the neighborhood crime prevention councils. In collaboration with OPD, this is what we're calling our summer strategy, and we're putting it together basically with neighborhood and community engagement. We don't have a lot of funding. We don't have funding for it. We've applied for a couple of grants, but we're talking about community mobilization starting early July. So that's kind of where we're at. Councilmember, please direct me to make sure that I'm addressing what you think this should be addressing.
I think that's good. I think one of the things that came out before that I think could be something that the neighbors on Nay might be willing to take on or to do is, as you said, host activities like a community block party, like a neighborhood happy hour where everyone is on their driveway or in front of their home with some music and just sort of hanging out to activate the street, create more activity. I know the programming aspect that goes along with the infrastructure aspect that goes along with the overall the overall strategy. So I know that's what had come up in other conversations, and I'm curious to know how residents sort of feel about sort of what has been shared, both from the infrastructure side, from DOT, the study, and the potential of having Nay as a safe street, the willingness or desire to create the programming that brings that positive sort of energy to the area. And so with that, maybe what we'll do is with the remainder of the time, go to Q&A or just comments for folks who want to share thoughts, perspectives, ideas, or questions for the benefit of everyone who's participating. So you can use the raise your hand feature or raise your hand physically. I know I have to scroll through a couple screens, but if anyone has any comments that they want to share or questions. I see Marika, since you're the first there, and then we'll go to Ankesanum. I got it wrong. You'll correct me once we unmute. All right, sorry about that. Go ahead, Marika.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sure that you have seen comments in regards to Nay Street as being a slow street implemented, and I'm all for that. However, I am only for it if as far as Outlook Avenue could be included as well, because right now Outlook is the only other street that could be used as a thorough street coming off of 73rd, as opposed to Nay. And you know, if you don't go down all the way to Nay, you're going to take a left on Outlook before you get to MacArthur, and that's going to cause an issue. Right on my street, as soon as you enter, you take the left onto Outlook from 73rd. That is practically a one-way street. There is only one cars can go because the street is narrow and there is no room for two cars to pass. So there's a lot of hit and runs that going on and happening in that street, and particularly in the section between 73rd and Parker, because there's just simply not enough room, and the cars are speeding by, and they're running into parked cars, they're running into curbs, they're running into each other, and that's an ongoing issue. And you know, I feel like as far as Nay is concerned, I see that they have the same problem, but if they're gonna close Nay, as for Safe Street, it's all gonna come up to Outlook, and I am really not for that. I live on that street and I know the issues, and I can tell you firsthand that it's gonna be a nightmare.
Thank you for that, Marika. Definitely important to take into account not just your thoughts, but how one thing we do will impact other streets as well. I don't know if anyone from DOT can speak to what they've observed in terms of when one slow street happens, how the traffic moves, or if there's been any thought or consideration to having two parallel slow streets.
I'll just jump in. I think that's important input. In general, we've been able to do the slow streets because traffic volumes have been so reduced during COVID-19. And for example, a street like 42nd Street in North Oakland, you'd normally have the concern that 45th Street, which was the Outlook to Nay and the ratio, would get spillover traffic. And because volume was down, we haven't seen that. And we actually have many neighbors on parallel routes that have still supported their sort of neighbor's slow street, and it's sort of benefited the whole neighborhood. But you know, this input, you know, every neighborhood is slightly different, so it's important we get the input.
Thank you. Next, and I need you to help me out with your name, and then I'll get it. I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
It's Ankesanamen.
Got you. Ankesanamen.
Yes. So I want to do two things to second Marika's comment. I actually live right off of Parker and Outlook, and I even called in today to the police department because there was a near hit and run of an actual pedestrian. People fly up and down these streets. We have stop signs that no one follows. I do believe that they need to be repainted so that is much clearer. But you know, in terms of small things, I think there's a lot we can do. I'm particularly curious about the research study. I know that across the nation there are several different or several communities very similar to ours where there has been research done, and I'm wondering if that has been looked into and if we can implement some of those tools that have been discovered that are effective in those areas here immediately, so that we don't have to wait for such a huge gap of time to pass and get all this additional research. I'm wondering if we can use the data that's already floating out there to begin doing something effectively. And then the last comment I have is about the fireworks. Last night we had a patrol car drive through, I would say maybe 10-ish, maybe a little earlier. That made a significant difference in terms of reducing the fireworks, and it stopped at least for a couple of hours. It did pick back up again, but the fact that having a presence reduced the fireworks was significant. And as you can tell, it's kind of several issues that are compounding. There's fireworks, there's gunshots, there's going through the stop sign, there's speeding, but the small efforts have made a significant impact. So my ultimate question is, what are some things that can be done before the end of this week or next week that can help kind of stem the tide of what's happening in our community?
So I'm gonna let DOT respond to what's in their scope and then go to Captain Eric Lewis, who looks like is still here. I'm grateful for that, who might be able to speak to some of the other elements that are within OPD's scope.
Yeah, I'll jump in again. I don't want to take up too much time, but we can quickly do like refurbish signs and markings to make them brighter and more clearly. That's in very quick. In terms of using other places' studies, what's important is that we understand in this specific place so that we decide on the treatment. We know that will work. We need to know the traffic volumes and the patterns. It might be improving signal timing at MacArthur and 73rd will reduce the backup up the hill, which will reduce the incentive to turn left onto Outlook or Nay. So those are the things. So before we pour concrete or do bigger treatments, we need to figure out those things. Slow streets is a new tool in our toolbox that involves placing barricades in the road very inexpensively and also easy to remove. So that's why we're also having this conversation of, hey, we could try out Nay. If it becomes a problem on Outlook, we can immediately make that adjustment because we're not spending thousands or scores of thousands of dollars.
Thanks for that, Ryan. Lee, I see you. I want to turn to Captain Lewis, if you don't mind, Captain Lewis, to respond to some of what we heard. I think related to the fireworks was one, and I think there may have been something else that, and maybe you can just respond to the presence that has been established in the area. Captain Lewis. See if you. All right. Seems like we don't have him.
Councilmember, just a quick comment.
Go ahead, Chief Secretary.
That, prior to this meeting about slow streets, we had deployed violence interrupters and community members that know that area as a result of some of the violence that was going on, specifically the homicide of Miles Armstead.
Yeah.
So there are people actively on the ground trying to slow down or mitigate the shooting in that area in particular. This is separate. It coordinates with law enforcement, but it's not law enforcement personnel. Just so that the residents know that we, in coordination with OPD, have been very aware of that area. And these slow streets, it's an additional tool, as Ryan said, that is being implemented. And the rest of the city, the sort of public safety mechanism of the city has been aware of the shootings for some time now. So we're really looking forward to this particular pilot, if you will, of slow streets as we continue the groundwork that is taking place, has been taking place for a while, and will continue to take place around the 73rd Avenue area.
Thank you for that, Chief Cespedes. In light of Captain Lewis not being on, I wanted to, it looks like he is on. Captain Lewis. I'm gonna unmute you there.
Great.
Are you able to,
Great. All right.
There you go.
Fell off briefly. And I got a real poor connection here, so hopefully you can hear me at least.
We can.
All right, so just to give you a little bit of an update, kind of in response to the recent violence that we saw on Nay Avenue, I strategically deployed a car specifically for the 7600 to 7900 block of Ney, in addition to 75th and MacArthur. So these are dedicated officers. They're going to be out there for the foreseeable future. And their hours are 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. So we got about 16 hours of coverage with officers. They're not answering 911 calls. They're there strictly for the purpose of having presence in that area. So if you haven't seen them yet, pop out, you'll see a car out in that area. And I can tell you that since that initiative began, there has been no shootings in the area. So hopefully that will help calm some of the violence there. I agree with Chief Cespedes in that, as we start to see things calm down, that people definitely get out of their homes, have meetings with neighbors from across the street or whatever you need to do. Say hi to the officers out there. And that, from our experience, definitely has an impact on crime in our communities. But as long as I can, I'm going to keep that car there, present. Just to speak to some of the traffic concerns, I know that our traffic division was in the area last week, and they issued several citations then as well. So we'll keep that going for everyone out there.
Thank you for that. And I do want to just lift up the OPD's response to recent uptick in violence and activities. I am appreciative for stepping up in this way, and the partnership, as I said before, which is different from what we have seen. And so we all know that if you try and do the same thing time and time again, expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity. And so I'm appreciative for those who are willing to try some new things that maybe we will have to learn and tweak and refine, but that's what's needed in terms of what really sort of moving from where we have been. Lee, I think you were next.
Yeah, I understand the work that Lucas is working on is a little more long-term, but as far as the slow streets, I don't know if this is for Megan or Ryan, but how soon can we make that happen? What do we need to wait on at this point? I don't think anyone's opposed to it. What's the turnaround time?
There you go, Ryan.
Yeah, so slow streets, because they're so inexpensive and flexible, we have been doing them without doing them quite quickly. And we've actually done the preliminary kind of engineering and are prepared to install as early as this Friday to start learning. And so what we wanted in our conversations with the council member, we thought it was important for us to really hear you all and get this and make sure we're talking with OPD, DVP, the council member's office, and the community. So what we intend to do is connect with the council member and our other partners to make that decision whether we do this Friday the initial sort of testing out of the NAAV slow street.
I'd like to jump in and say something.
Please.
I live on the corner of 76th and Outlook, and I had to jump out of bed a few days ago because they were shooting right in front of my house. And a couple weeks back, they were shooting. They shot across the street on 76th and Outlook. And I don't know that if you implement slow street on A, I think it's going to highly impact Outlook with the traffic. People speeding, and I don't think the slow street's really going to make a huge difference, because the people that are shooting, they're not down there shooting randomly, they're shooting at people for a reason. And when these people that are committing most of the violent acts with guns, they're going to still get after the people they're looking for. They're not just going to, oh, there's a slow street, I'm not going to go and try to kill this person now. They're still going to try to get to the people. They're just going to have the people, the getaway cars sit on the corner, so they'll run around the corner, opposed to having the getaway car sit maybe right on Ney, which a lot of times they don't sit that near. So I just don't think that that's going to have a huge impact on the crime. I think a police presence is a great thing to help reduce crime, but it's going to highly impact the residents on Outlook. And I just don't think that's a good idea at all. We already have a lot of people speeding on our street. We have, even with the COVID-19, we still have a ton of cars coming up and down Outlook. And it's just gonna be a nightmare. And if Outlook can't be made a slow street along with Nay, I am totally opposed to making Nay a slow street.
All right, absolutely hear you, and I see some a lot of nodding in agreement there. I guess what I would emphasize is that at this point we've got the OPD commitment to have somebody available, and I guess what I want to emphasize is that what I believe is being proposed now is a combination of multiple solutions at one point in time, while slow streets wouldn't curb things by itself. I think in combination with the police presence and some community activation, I think bringing multiple solutions to bear at the same point in time has the potential to have a different impact than just one of those on its own. That being said, completely hear what you're saying, and want to make sure that we, as the City of Oakland team, are hearing that and taking that concern back.
And the other thing is, if Nay and Outlook were slow streets, that would direct more traffic down to MacArthur, which is a big thoroughfare that can handle traffic. If something like that could be done, that makes much more sense. But to make Nay a slow street right there is not good, because Outlook is already a major thoroughfare for people coming up and down 73rd Avenue. It's a terrible idea. Again, it's not going to do anything for the crime, because they're going to go after the people they want.
Chief Cespedes, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to sort of, support what you were saying, that the kinds of violence and the resident is correct that the kind of violence that is being committed, it's being committed by a very, very small group of people, but it has a huge impact. And a lot of it is, it's not just random. So what we know about violence is that not one intervention is really sufficient. You have to do multiple things. I don't understand traffic flow and all of that, but I'm really learning from the residents, the response of the residents about it, and learning from Ryan's team. We will continue to have a presence in that area. We don't have cars. In fact, most of the people that we work with are not people they're sort of working almost underground in hopes that we can mitigate this thirst for retaliation that is going on. And it could be over something simple, but that is partly what creates a lot of these shootings, this back and forth of settling arguments with shootings. So the resident is very correct. The idea is not that slow streets will stop crime by itself. Slow streets is one component of a broader strategy that we're literally building as we're talking. Everybody will be on the ground when it takes place. Whether it takes place on one street or two streets or three streets simultaneously, that's a decision that we don't make, but we will have people on the ground that are already assigned to that area as part of our operations, normal operations. This is a tough time for the city, but what I can also say, and I've worked in many, many cities across the world, the level of collaboration I'm seeing between social programs, law enforcement, and other departments, it's pretty unique, and I've been in this business for 40 years. So what's happening in Oakland, I know is not yet bearing concrete success, and we haven't stopped all shootings. But I think we're doing all the right things. and we have to keep doing them until we can get a handle on this situation.
Thank you for that, Chief. Recognizing that it is about a 7:11, we had the schedule for 1 hour. I see 2 hands raised on the screen, Jose and then Dana. So I'll go with you guys in that order. And then maybe a couple, 1 or 2 more questions, closing comments, and then we can wrap up. So Jose. Here, I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for your time and setting this meeting for the community to be able to be heard. I have 2 questions, but first I want to make a comment. So thank you for making this meeting and a meeting in regards to the NAY corridor. As NAY is zoned differently than other residential streets, NAY is zoned with multi-unit housing, a lot of apartment buildings across the corridor between 82nd and 73rd, which has access to 82nd and 73rd Avenue, which I disagree with the previous community member from Outlook. Outlook doesn't have the same outlet, is not zoned the same from that perspective. And I think that this is all collaboration, as I understand. To set a precedent of all or nothing is probably the wrong precedent to do. So I think that's one comment. The one question that I have is in regards to going back to funding to DOT, and the timeline of the project is six months. Is there any way that timeline can be reduced? I can see the 3 CPC meetings are within 3 months, so can that be reduced? The part of the timeline and the budget question is that if we're going to depend on grants, and if we know ahead of time, given the experience of different projects, can you tell us how can the community get behind in any sort of initiative regarding, so money is not an issue when it comes down to deploying any of the initiatives? Because if we know ahead of time, and there's a lot of talent in this call, and that we can get together, I would be gladly to participate in that sort of initiative 6 months ahead, until 6 months later telling me that we have a 50% gap on the budget. So that's one of the question on the budget. The second one is for Mr. Cespedes. Thank you for being in attendance. NAY has been a long, I only been here, I grew up in East Oakland, but residents from NAY, my neighbor, he's a retired teacher, he's been here for 30 years, is a corridor with a long violent history. So question is, have we partnered in the past in a corridor like this one, or with NAY, with your humble budget of $9 million and your 16 units of deployment? What have we pragmatically been able to do in corridors like this with such a long history? And how we're gonna what initiatives do we have immediately? Those are my 2 things. So
For sure. And those are great questions. The initiatives that we have initially, by the way, the 16 people that I was talking about, that is just related to 16 people that are doing the COVID prevention work. But the first step is to separate violence that is associated with groups, which is a very different type of violence than you normally get with random things like the homicide of Armstead, per reports of my staff, was not really group related. So those are 2 different things. That was sort of unpredictable. In terms of long-term issues with corridors like NAY, one of the things that the COVID-19 virus has exposed is that the conditions in some of the neighborhoods have to be changed. It's not just enough to sort of change the symptom. There are underlying conditions that are creating this. Most of our work, I call it work about putting out the fire. And there's this longer term work that has to do with fireproofing. That's where you need kind of longer term strategy. So you have to do both. The specific corridor of NAY Street, I have not been working in that corridor. I came back to Oakland. I was recruited back to Oakland from overseas after years of being away. So, but generally, where violence is entrenched, it really takes a concentrated effort of first putting out the fire enough so the community residents can take over the community and start being present. Remember, there are a lot less people doing the shooting than there are community members that are willing to be present. So it takes two things, Jose. It takes immediately stepping into the corridor and lowering the level of shootings enough for community residents to feel empowered. And then it means we have to come out of the house and take over the neighborhood. Those are the only two things that I know that have worked in cities across the country where I've worked, and in some places overseas. It is not a, I wish we could put up a stop sign and that would stop the shootings. But the nature of the work that we do it's really about relationships and getting people to stand down and really put down old beefs. There are people in the Nate corridor, I don't know them, but I'm assuming they're fighting over things that can go back generations. So what we know works is first there has to be sufficient lowering of the violence for community members to feel empowered to come out of the house and do different activities. In essence, take over the neighborhood, change the culture of the neighborhood. And that's where we're going, but we're not there yet. And I personally will be getting back to you and the rest of the group about what we can do at a community level. The immediate issue right now is putting out the fire and getting some community engagement going. And putting out the fire includes my team, and includes OPD, who we coordinate with twice a week, and we're on the phone with them all of the time. And I am very sorry that we haven't been able to lower the flame enough for all of you to feel comfortable. What I can assure you is that we're going to continue working around the clock on it. And we think we'll be successful. And if we're not, then we have to try something else. But we're trying only things that we know have worked before. So I hope that answers your question. There are two things with entrenched corridors. Lower the flame enough to be able to mobilize community. And at that point, change the culture of the neighborhood. And that takes time. Changing the culture of a neighborhood takes time.
Another thing that could help, if anything, to me that would be better than slow streets are license plate readers. So that every car that goes in and out of that area, the license plates are read. And that way they can be tracked through that. Although sometimes people do steal cars, but a lot of times they're driving through, speeding crazily down the streets in their own vehicles. And I think a lot of the problem on Ney Street are some of the people that are living there that probably are selling drugs. And a lot of the crime is basically drug related. I'm sure we all can probably agree with that. They're just not random little beefs. A lot of it's over drug turf. This person didn't pay that person, and stuff like that. And that's just not going to be curtailed by a slow street.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chief Cespedes, for your response. Ryan or someone from DOT, do you want to speak to the question around whether or not how community can help with helping to address funding gaps or make sure that funding is lined up once a study is complete and solutions are identified? Megan?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. With respect to the funding request, we're really excited that to be talking tonight, and this is really the beginning of a conversation that we're going to have. But it's also, we do need to emphasize the importance of the study for us to understand the context of what is needed on the street. However, our Safe Streets team has in it, a toolbox of things that includes both the slow streets intervention that's possible in the very near term, but also other things like signs and painting and other near-term improvements that will be identified by the study that our team is really excited about figuring out how to implement as soon as possible. So we really just want to emphasize, our commitment to delivering on the corridor, and also, really looking to this as the beginning of a conversation for us to better understand. We've seen a lot of issues that are elevated in the chat, with respect to stop signs and, opportunities for restriping. We know that there's a lot more that we can review in the chat and learn from everyone who's here tonight. But, with respect to the longer term funding, that's something that we're working on. We have a flexible toolbox, and we look forward to incrementally figuring out how that can be rolled out as a part of the study.
Thank you, Megan. I'm going to go to Dana. Dana Morgan has had her hand raised for a little while, and then we'll wrap up. Dana? I'll go ahead and unmute you. Are you?
Loren, while we wait, can I say something?
Go for it.
So I actually wanted to get Megan, thank you for your answer. I actually was asking in regards to the study presentation that Lucas presented. My question was, he mentioned grants and budget. So your answer, thank you for your answer, but that didn't really actually answer my question. Was in regards to the grants and budget, because I think similarly Oakland or DOT has done projects similar to this one, so they have an expected budget potentially, and we might already know how much we don't have or have. So my question is specifically is, what is it that we need to do ahead of time, not at when the study is done? So more specific, what can we do ahead?
And if we need to get back to Jose and team with a response to that, we can certainly do that as well.
Thank you.
Give you a little bit of space, Megan.
Sure. Thank you for that breathing room. I think, I just want to assure you that OakDOT, we consistently work with, our staff that helps identify the capital improvement project, but we don't have a final figure right now, just because that study will be so critical for us to understand. So this is something that is a high priority and an iterative process, and happy to come back with more information if that would be helpful.
Thanks for that. Dana, it looks like you're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. This is Dana's husband, Ray. We've lived here since 1988, and in that time, we've seen possibly 3 to 4 homicides. We're not under any illusion that slow streets don't stop violence. But what we're trying to do is not want our street to be an alternate for MacArthur. That's our immediate problem right now. And we're willing to work with anybody around to get the neighborhood safe, because we understand that the universal neighborhood doesn't start on Nay and it doesn't end on Nay. But Nay is the main corridor, sometimes more even than Outlet or MacArthur. So we have to do something to start Nay. Because Nay also, there's a school on Nay. There's no school on Outlet, and there's no school on MacArthur, but there's a school on Nay. And kids are constantly running, jumping out of their cars. I've seen it happen time to time. I've seen people being chased by the police down Nay. So Nay definitely I think is a good place to start the experiment to see if it's going to work. And so I'll wait to see what happens. I've witnessed police on motorcycles in the last 3 weeks, or 2 weeks for sure, in front of my house and on the corner. And people come down Nay and disregard the police. The police had to turn around and chase them just because they don't want to even recognize the police there. So Nay has a problem that has to be taken care of, but people don't take it serious.
And also, to me, as being on Nay, to me, I would think that Outlook, since we're all neighbors, that we're all in this together. What one gets, we're all going to get. That should help the community. And we're in grade school. Well, we don't want them to have it if we can't get it. This is going to help all of us. If they put a slow stop down on Parker and Nay, that's going to stop anybody from going up to Outlook. And people aren't looking at that. That's going to help all of us in the end. And instead of saying we don't want them to have it because it's going to cause problem for us, that's not a good way to look at things. That's just not a good way to look at things. I've been fighting this battle for at least 10, 12 years
No,
to
25 years.
get roundabouts. And so I'm taking slow streets, bring them on. You know, I would love it. I think that would make a difference for all of us in this community, from NAY to Outlook, you know, and instead of fussing, no, we don't want that. That's not a way to be. That's not a good way. That's not a neighborly way to be.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Ray. At this point, we're at 7:26. I think I'll turn it over to Ryan from DOT or Chief Cespedes from DVP if you have any closing sort of words, thoughts before wrapping up. And I do want to acknowledge everyone. We will be reviewing the chat notes to see what we didn't touch on that we can follow up with offline. And there, you can always reach out to my office with additional feedback, questions, concerns, district6@oaklandca.gov. Ryan, I'll give you a chance to close out.
Sure. I just really want to thank you all for taking the time to advocate for what you clearly have a right to have, which is a safe, free, comfortable, livable neighborhood. And there's certainly big challenges, but like I said before, when we hear that fine-grained what you see on your street, it helps us make good decisions as a government. And I think it's important to see this as a beginning and sort of a snowball that will go down a hill and build momentum to get us where we all know the community deserves to be. And that if we can make progress and build off of it, and maybe it all won't be linear, maybe sometimes there'll be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I think we can kind of get there. And I want to thank my team for engaging in this, and your leadership, Councilmember Taylor, for bringing us together.
Thank you, Chief Cespedes.
Yeah, from my end, I fully agree with Ryan. I do think that this is the beginning of a different kind of engagement between city government, specifically OPD, the Department of Violence Prevention, the Department of Transportation, and your office, Councilmember, and the community. So I think that's a great start, and I am hoping that Slow Street in that area move forward. I think I'm looking forward to being on the ground and getting to know the neighbors as we walk through the street slowly. And our efforts will continue to try to break up this historical pocket of violence, whether that violence is related to drugs or gang activity or both. We're very committed to getting on the ground and making a difference. So thank you all for your time and for your suggestions. And we're going to continue working hard on your behalf.
Great. Thanks, Chief Cespedes. And before final closeout, Jose, you want to give an update relative to the NCPC meeting, just to give everybody that information?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. I just wanted to, there's still 27 people out here, and I can reach out to you and your heart. Please tomorrow show up at the NCPC. Well, you don't have to show up. Zoom call. I shared the link in there, so we just get the overall Beat 30Y update from different members of our leadership, like Loren Taylor and OPD and such. Please, tomorrow at 6:30, log in. I'll see you there.
I'll see you there.
Great commercial. All right, and that was it, folks. Thank you all for taking the time. Thank you to DOT, DVP, Violence Prevention, OPD. Have a great night, evening, and look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Loren.
Well,
License plate readers.
I'm taking notes. License plate readers. We will follow up.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
All right, bye-bye. How you get out?